So we're in Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. But obviously that Romans passage is quite important, Romans chapter 3, and you'll see why as we go along. But just keep Romans chapter 12 open. You can keep a finger in Romans chapter 3 if you wish, but we're in Romans chapter 12. First I want to tell you about a man, and this man had crippling debt, monumental debt. It's a kind of money problem that keeps you awake at night. In fact, more than it keeps you up at night, it dominates your thoughts. It dominates everything you do. You can imagine that kind of pressure on top of this man as he goes about his life, as he spends time perhaps with his family, just hanging over him. This anxiety that keeps bubbling to the surface whenever he stops and thinks, kind of sucks the joy out of everything that he's doing. Every good moment is tainted by his anxiety at this financial situation. He's racked up a debt that is impossible to pay back. And I mean impossible. Even if he gave his yearly wage every single year for 100,000 years, he'd only just be halfway. That's where we're up to with this man. He cannot pay back his debt. And so he lives in fear. He lives with this sense of impending doom because the payment deadline's coming. The payment deadline's coming, and when the deadline comes, his life is going to be over. He's going to be put to death. In fact, because he owes so much money, it's not just going to be his life that'll be over. It'll be the life of his wife, the life of his children. He loses his family if he can't pay back this debt. And so the day comes, the day he's been dreading, and he walks, presumably with very heavy steps, towards his master, the king, and he bows down before him. This is the one that he's taken the money from. And he falls onto his face and he pleads one last time, have mercy. Have mercy. And really, we shouldn't be feeling sorry for the man. He's not a victim. He's a crook. He's swindled. He's essentially stolen the king's money because he's just taken and taken and taken. He's never had any thought about paying anything back. And so he owes the king this extraordinary amount. And yet, with his life on the line, finally he begs one more time, have mercy. You know what the king says? Okay, you're forgiven. I cancel the debt. You and your family can go. I mean, it's extraordinary, isn't it? The king doesn't just give him more time to pay back. He doesn't just shorten or reduce the debt or reduce the sentence. He just cancels it. Losing out on so much money, the king, knowing he's not going to get anything in return, he just cancels it. And you can imagine this man, this servant, you can imagine the weight off his shoulders. How would he be feeling in that moment? The stress just released. You know, you imagine the way that he would have stood up and left the room. Can you imagine the joy he would have feel as he leaves those doors when he sees his wife and his children again? To know that they're free of this horrible debt. To know that there's no more death coming, not for him and not for his wife and kids either. I mean, presumably he would have skipped out the room. Such was his joy. Everything's got new life to it now. But before he goes to his family, he finds his colleague. It says that he goes and finds him. And as soon as he sees his colleague after this massive high, he grabs him and begins to choke the life out of him. Begins to crush the life out of him. Why? Because this man owes him a couple months' wages. He owes him a couple of silver coins. He's just had this crippling debt removed, 200,000 years worth of wages versus a couple of months, and he chokes this man. And the man, as he's being choked and his life sort of drained out of him, what does he do? He pleads for mercy. Have mercy, he says. And our first man says, no. Pay me. And then throws him in prison. I mean, it's shocking, isn't it? I think we're supposed to be shocked by that story. It's staggering, the response that this man has, because what should he do? The debtor, the one that's just had this crushing debt forgiven, what should he do? Everybody listening to the story would say, well, he should just forgive the man, shouldn't he? He should just run straight home to his wife and his kids, and he should tell them the good news and celebrate with them and tell them, look, our life is going to be different now. I've not got the weight of this money problem. I'm not even going to be bothered about money anymore. We've got a new life. We can have this good news to tell all these people. There's no more burden for us. And then when he bumps into his colleague, what should he do? He should embrace him. Tell him the good news. My burden's gone. I'm free. Don't worry about your debt. My massive debt is gone. That's what he should do, because he was a dead man. And now he's alive. When you're shown mercy on that kind of level, there should be a response. Naturally, we all feel that. In fact, that's why Jesus tells this story in Matthew 18. Because his point is, if you've received mercy like that, you can see it in somebody's life. And actually, that man hadn't really understood it. He hadn't really grasped it or thanked the king for it. If he'd understood the depths of the mercy he's been shown, you would have seen it. Naturally, there would have flowed a response. When you understand mercy, it changes the way you live. Changes the way you live. And that's true for us this morning. You see, before we get into Romans chapter 12, which is where we're heading over the next few weeks, before we get into what happens next in Romans, we have to understand mercy. Look at chapter 12, verse 1. I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God. Or if you've got an NIV, this is how it puts it. Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy. Everything he's about to say next, he says it in view of God's mercy, in light of God's mercy. Because here's what's going on in the book. Paul is essentially, over the next 5 chapters or so, going to give us what looks like a load of instructions. He's going to tell us how to live godly lives. This is what godly living looks like. This is how you should live with one another, he's going to say. But before we get into the details of it, he says, but your godly living only comes in light of God's mercy. You've got to understand God's mercy. That's what Romans 1 to 11 is all about. That's what we spent a year looking at, God's mercy. Just glance back a few verses. Look how the end of Romans 11 ends, verses 30 to 32. For just as you were at one time disobedient to God, but now have received mercy because of their disobedience, so they too have now been disobedient, in order that by the mercy shown to you, they also may now receive mercy. For God has consigned all to disobedience, that he may have mercy on all. It's all about mercy. And Paul wants to know, before we go any further, before we start thinking about godly living, he wants to know, have you grasped the depths of God's mercy? Have we understood it? We are in a position far worse than the man in that story. That's what Paul's been telling us for weeks. We have an impossible debt that we cannot pay, which is why we read Romans 3, actually, because it says that we've fallen short of God's glory. It says that we carry this tremendous weight. It says that we're heading to death and God's righteous judgment. Our situation is so much worse. And so when God comes to us and says, well, I forgive you, well, the mercy is so much greater. That God would cancel our debt that is far worse than the man's debt in the story, that God would take our sin and give us life. And so what should follow? What do you expect to see? Well, thankfulness. This is a natural thankfulness flowing out. I mean, we talked about how shocking the story was, and it is shocking, isn't it? The man wasn't grateful at all. Well, how much more for us then should we expect to see thankfulness? And so Paul here in Romans chapter 12, he says, in light of all of that, in light of what God has done, in light of his mercy to you, give your life to him. Give your life to him because of what he's done. There's two main points he makes in these two verses of Romans 12. Essentially saying this is what it looks like to give your life to God. This is what it looks like. This is our response to his mercy. The first thing is this. Give your life to him wherever you are. Give your life to him wherever you are. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, in the world around you, give your life to him in that. That's the first thing. Look at verse 1 again. I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Paul, he gets us thinking about our bodies first. He says, present your bodies as a sacrifice. Everything you do with your body, he says, give it to God. But why our bodies? This would have been pretty insulting for some of the people at the time when this was written, because they didn't really like thinking about the human body that much. They were kind of interested in the spiritual side of things. They wanted to be spiritually good people. But actually here we see it's important what we do with our bodies. What we do in our day-to-day life. Our whole bodies should be used to worship God. That's the goal. The goal here is worshiping God in everything, in every aspect of life. See, the problem we used to have is we didn't worship God. The problem we used to have is we couldn't worship God, especially with our bodies. This is the verse we had read earlier in the service, Romans chapter 3. Romans 3, verses 13 to 18. Their throat is an open grave. They use their tongues to deceive. The venom of asps is under their lips. Their mouth is full of curses and bitterness. Their feet are swift to shed blood. You see, our bodies, our mouths, our eyes, our feet, every part of our body, we used it for sin. We didn't worship God with it. Our bodies were sinful. But now he's redeemed us. He's redeemed our bodies. We're going to give our bodies to God. My mouth I'm going to use to build people up. My feet I'm going to use to move towards people. Do you see that? Our bodies, it says, are to be holy. That's temple language. Temple language. It just means that it's set apart for God. Holy is the word that you would use to say something is God's. It belongs to him. It's used for him. It belongs in the temple. So, for example, you would have a holy candlestick. I mean, it's just a normal candlestick, but it's used for God. You'd have one candlestick that was used in your house to light up your room. Then a holy candlestick was, well, that's God's candlestick. That's going to be in his temple to be used for him. Your body is holy. Now, that doesn't mean it's perfect in every way. It just means it's his now. It belongs to him. We've got to use it for him. You see this temple language again with the word sacrifice. It's Levitical language. Last year we spent a good while in Leviticus. And if you remember, or you can go back and listen to it, there were 5 offerings given in Leviticus for worship. It's all about worship, 5 offerings. And one of these offerings was given in thanksgiving. It was the grain offering, a thanksgiving sacrifice, it was called. And it was this sacrifice of food that you gave to God. And it didn't save you. It didn't do anything to save you. But you just gave it because you're thankful because you've already been saved. The Israelites would be so thankful for what God has done to save them that they'd want to give him a gift. They'd want to give him an offering. And they'd bring him some food that they'd cooked. And it seems so small and insignificant, doesn't it, compared to what they've received. But it's just because they wanted to give. And it says that the Lord was pleased. He was pleased with what they gave him. Well, the same is true for us here. God has saved us. He's given us his Son to die for us. And we're so thankful that we want to give something back. And the gift that pleases God, the gift that you can give that pleases God, is yourself. And that might seem so small and insignificant in comparison to what we've received. But it pleases him. Do you know it pleases him when you give your life to him and worship him with everything that you do? He just wants you. Do you know when you get a wedding invite and the happy couple says, "Don't get us a present. We're just happy with you. We're just happy that you came to be here." I mean, you don't really believe them. I'm sure you think they'd probably like me and a present. But here, this is genuinely what God says. He says, actually, all I want is you. I just want you. I want your life because I've saved you and I love you and I've made you holy. I've made you mine. So all I want is for you to give yourself to me. That's all I want. And that pleases him. You please him. That's a wonderful, wonderful thing to think, isn't it? That you can please God. And so that's how we're called to worship him today. We're called just to give our lives. And the language is of the temple and sacrifice, but the context is not. The context is the workplace. The context is the office, the school, the street, the sports pitch. Every area of your life, wherever you are, give it to him. And as we go through the rest of Romans, you'll see more specifically what some of these areas are that we've been called to godly living. But crucially here, before we get there, before we look at specifics, the godly living we're called to, crucially, only comes in light of his mercy. That's the first thing. In light of his mercy, give your whole life to him, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. But secondly, as you do that, don't become like wherever you are. Don't become like wherever you are. Look at verse 2. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your minds, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. See, here's the balance. We're called to live our lives in this world. We're called to live for God in all things, and yet there's a danger here, isn't there? Because the more we spend time in the world, the harder it can be to live for God. I mean, think back to the story of the servant at the start with his debt. He has that moment where the debt is forgiven. He has that moment where all his anxiety is gone, and he feels the weight of it released, and he's perhaps, thankful to the king in that moment. But then what happens? Soon as he leaves that room, as soon as he leaves those doors, he's back in reality. Maybe he's thinking about money again all of a sudden. Maybe he sees something that he wants and he needs money to buy it. Maybe he sees somebody walking past who looks rich and successful and thinks, I want that. Maybe he sees his colleague walking past looking rich and successful and thinks, well, that's not fair because he's got my money. Can you see how quickly he's changed? How quickly he's become like the world again, conformed to the world around him. He's just gone back to what everyone else is doing, back to what he was doing before. Have you forgotten the mercy you've just been shown? And we do the same, don't we? We have these moments where we see the depths of God's mercy, and then we go out into the world to live for him, ready to live for him, and then we see the world and we forget. We conform to it. We become like it. And notice that there's a problem here. As you conform to the world, it seems to have a negative effect on our sanctification. We're being transformed, it says. We're being transformed into the likeness of Jesus. But Paul here says, well, instead of being transformed, we conform to the world. You can't have both. These two things are held up against each other. Don't conform, be transformed. Be transformed by the renewing of our minds. So how do we do that? What do we do? Well, firstly, you've got to notice the word here is passive. It doesn't say transform yourself. It says be transformed. Be transformed. This is something that happens to you wonderfully, but the same question then, how does it happen to us? Perhaps you're sat here this morning and you're wanting to live for Jesus, but you keep failing. You just can't seem to live for him in every area of your life. Maybe you're looking at your life over the last few years and thinking, I can't seem to see change. Maybe you can't seem to break a pattern of sin. Maybe you find yourself conforming too quickly and too easily to be like the world around you. Maybe you find yourself being sucked into the world. So what do we do? Well, Romans 12, 1-2, on its own, won't help you. The next bit of Romans will tell you how you should be living, but on its own, it won't help you. And yet, that's what we seem to think. We think we just need to be told what to do. We think we just need more instructions. And we can read Romans 12 and go, yes, I should not conform. I should give my life. I need to do better. And we beat ourselves up. Why am I not being transformed? I'm going to try harder. I'm going to try harder not to conform. I'm going to make more sacrifices. I'm going to give more. Doesn't work. We have to really get this. We've not been told to do it that way. The commands that we receive in these verses, the commands we're going to receive in the rest of Romans, they have been given to us, remember, to be read in light of his mercy. In light of God's mercy, be transformed. In light of his mercy, don't conform. In light of God's mercy, give your life to him. Before you can do any of those things, you have to understand God's mercy. So we don't just read these verses. We read Romans 1 to 11. Read all the stuff that came before. If you want to see change in your life, if you want to see that transformation, if you want to know how you can give your life as a living sacrifice, you've got to read about the cross that comes before. You've got to read about God's mercy for you. You've got to read about God's forgiveness to you. You've got to read about how He's made you holy and adopted you and made you righteous. And then you've just got to keep reading it. Never move away from it. If you want to live a godly life, it can only be done through Christ. And understanding the cross and understanding His mercy. If you want to avoid being like the world, remind yourself of His mercy. If you want to live for Him in every aspect of your life, you've got to have His mercy right at the forefront of your mind, because you can't transform yourself, but you can be transformed. Be transformed through the work of the Spirit, by the teaching of the Word, as both of those things show you more of Jesus and show you His mercy. When you see what He has done, a thankful life will flow from it. When you see what Jesus has done, then you'll be able to live as a holy sacrifice to Him. And so as we look over the next few weeks, Romans 12 to 16, we need to constantly be looking back to the cross, seeing that debt removed, and then thankfulness will flow. We're going to pray and then sing, and then we're going to come round this table together. Let's pray. Father, thank you that you are a God of mercy. Father, this morning, stir our hearts by your Spirit that we may see the depths of that mercy, that we may have a sense of the debt removed, that we might feel the relief of sins forgiven. And Lord, I pray as we read the next few chapters of Romans, you will keep the work of your Son right at the forefront of our minds, that we never stray from your grace, that we never try and earn salvation, that we never try and do better off our own back, but instead in all that we do it in your grace, and we do it for your worship. Amen. This song, it follows the pattern of Romans, actually. Because of Jesus, because of what He's done, we then give our lives to Him. Come see His hands and His feet, the scars that speak of sacrifice, hands that flung stars into space to cruel nails surrendered. This is our God, the servant King. He calls us now to follow Him.